It was a cold Monday morning when Raymond arrived at the large glass building downtown. The sun had not fully come up, and the streets were still quiet. He wore his usual faded blue uniform, the one with his name stitched over the pocket. 64. Raymond was no longer young, but he moved with quiet strength. For over 20 years he had been cleaning the floors of this building, sweeping, mopping, wiping windows, always early, always unnoticed. The lobby was still empty when he began. The marble floor was shiny, and Raymond felt a little proud. Had just finished mopping a wide section near the main entrance when he placed a yellow wet floor sign at the edge. Then he walked to the side and started wiping down the glass doors. He didn't talk much, and most people in the building barely knew his name. But he took his work seriously. It was honest, and it was his. Suddenly the quiet was broken. A tall man in a dark coat and shiny leather shoes came rushing in through the main doors, talking loudly on a phone. His name was Charles Barrington, the CEO of the company that owned the building. He was in his late 40s, rich, powerful, and known by everyone in the business world. He had made millions through real estate and technology. People feared him more than they respected him. Charles was holding a large takeaway coffee in one hand and a fancy protein shake in the other. He wasn't watching where he was walking. His voice echoed through the lobby. No, sell it now, he snapped into the phone. As he stepped onto the newly mopped floor, his polished shoe slid just a little. Not enough to fall, but enough to make him angry. What the? He shouted, stopping and looking down. Then he saw the wet floor sign. And then he saw Raymond standing nearby with a cleaning cloth in hand. You could have gotten me killed, Charles barked, pointing at Raymond. Raymond walked over slowly and said in a calm voice, Sir, I placed the warning sign here. The floor is drying, please be careful. But Charles was not in the mood to listen. His voice got louder. This is a business, not a swimming pool. You think this is funny? Raymond stood quietly. He had been spoken to like this before, though never by someone this high up. Still, he kept calm. Charles looked at the protein shake in his hand. Then, without a word, he opened the lid and poured the creamy liquid straight over Raymond's head. The shake splashed down Raymond's face, soaking his collar, his chest, and dripping onto the clean floor he had just finished. The lobby fell completely silent. Raymond didn't move. His hands stayed at his sides. His eyes were wide, and for a moment it seemed like time had stopped. 2 employees who had just walked in froze in place. One of the security guards by the desk stood up, unsure what to do, but no one said a word. Charles simply shook his head and walked off toward the elevator, still on his phone as if nothing had happened. Raymond stood there for a moment, milk running down his cheeks. He slowly wiped his face with the cloth he had in his pocket. He looked down at his soaked shirt, then at the puddle forming on the ground. His lips were tight. His eyes blinked once, twice, but he said nothing. The janitor walked quietly to the supply closet and changed into the spare shirt he kept for emergencies, cleaned up the spill without help, and then he went back to work, as if nothing had happened. But someone had noticed Lena, a 26-year-old receptionist who had seen the whole thing, sat behind the front desk. Her hands were shaking. She looked over at the security monitor. There on the screen was the footage from the camera that faced the main entrance. It had captured everything: Raymond cleaning, the CEO walking in, the argument. And the moment the shake was dumped, she downloaded the clip onto a flash drive, unsure why. She just knew it didn't feel right. Her heart was beating fast. She wasn't close to Raymond, no one really was, but something about that moment touched her deeply. It felt unfair. It felt cruel. Upstairs, Charles entered the boardroom like a storm. He was still barking orders at his assistant and checking his tablet. Not once did he think about Raymond again. Raymond, meanwhile, finished his shift and clocked out early. He didn't want to cause trouble. He didn't tell the supervisor. He didn't complain. Just went home. His small apartment was quiet. He took off the spare shirt and put the wet one in a bucket to soak. He sat on the edge of his bed, tired. On the wall above his dresser was a small picture of his late wife, smiling. She had passed away 6 years ago. He missed her most on days like this. Raymond whispered to her photo, You always told me to keep my head high." He lay down for a while. He didn't want attention. He didn't want revenge. But deep inside, something had changed at the office. Lena stared at the flash drive on her desk. She knew she couldn't just let it go. She thought about it all afternoon. And finally, she made a decision. She texted a friend who worked in media. "I have something you need to see. I think people need to know." That night, the video appeared on a small social media page. The caption read, "Billionaire CEO humiliates cleaner for doing his job." The footage showed everything: the argument, the milk, the silence. Raymond's face, it began with only a few shares, then a few hundred, then thousands. By midnight, the video had gone viral. Raymond slept quietly, unaware of the storm that had just begun. But the world was watching. It would never be the same again. The next morning, Raymond woke up at his usual time, 5:30 a.m. The sun was still hiding, and the city outside his window was silent. He stretched his arms and got out of bed. His joints ached a little, but that was normal for a man his age. Brushing his teeth and making a small cup of tea, he put on his uniform. It was the same one he had washed the night before, the one that still had a faint smell of protein shake, no matter how hard he tried to clean it. Raymond didn't check his phone much. He didn't have social media. He used an old flip phone, mostly to make short calls to his daughter or to get messages from work. So he had no idea that overnight his life had become the center of a storm. Meanwhile, on the internet, the video was everywhere. The 40-second clip showed Charles Barrington throwing a drink over an elderly janitor and walking away. It had no sound, but the look on Raymond's face spoke louder than any words. Thousands of people had commented, asking, "Who is this man? Why did no one help him? And how can someone so rich be so heartless?" By 8 a.m., news channels had picked it up. Headlines read, "Billionaire CEO humiliates elderly cleaner on camera, and outrage grows over viral workplace abuse." Video. Lena, the receptionist, who had shared the video with her friend, sat at her desk with a mixture of nervousness and pride. She never expected it to spread this far. She only wanted people to know what Raymond had gone through. She watched as co-workers walked into the building, whispering to each other, all checking their phones. A few looked at Raymond, who had just arrived with his head slightly down. He didn't understand why everyone was staring in the elevator. Nice. 2 junior employees were watching the video on their phones and gasped when Raymond stepped in. One of them looked uncomfortable. "It's him," she whispered. Raymond noticed but said nothing. He got off at the lobby and started sweeping quietly, just like always. At 9:15 a.m., Charles Barrington arrived at the office building. Unlike the day before, he was not on the phone. His head was slightly turned down. There were photographers outside. He had to push through them to get to the door. Porters yelled questions like, "Mr. Barrington, do you have anything to say to the janitor?" You going to apologize?" He said nothing. His face was tight. He walked faster than usual and headed straight to his office. Inside, his assistant Melissa was waiting. "Sir," she said quietly, "the board is calling a meeting this afternoon." "What?" "And it's not looking good." Charles rolled his eyes. "It's a cleaning guy." He slipped. I reacted. "It's being blown out of proportion." Melissa swallowed hard. "Sir, the video. It's got over 8 million views. And people are angry. Investors are calling. They're worried." At the same time, Raymond's phone buzzed. It was his daughter, Tanya. She lived in another city and hadn't called this early in years. "Dad, are you okay?" she asked quickly. Raymond was confused. "I'm fine, sweetheart." "Why?" "Dad, you're all over the internet. That man, he threw milk at you. Everyone saw it." Raymond sat down on a bench in the hallway. He didn't know what to say. "I didn't want this," he finally said. "I didn't ask for anyone to see it." "I know, Dad," Tanya said gently. "But maybe it's good that they did. People are standing up for you." Later that afternoon, a local news van arrived at the building. It waited outside with cameras, hoping to get a statement. Some staff members tried to avoid them, while others whispered excitedly. Lena sat behind the front desk, watching. She felt nervous, but she didn't regret what she had done. When Raymond walked by, she stood up and walked over. "Mr. Raymond," she said softly. He looked up at her with kind eyes. "Yes, I just want to say I'm sorry for what happened and thank you. You've worked here longer than anyone and we've never really said how much we appreciate you." Raymond smiled a little, then nodded. "Thank you, dear. It means more than you know." Later that evening, a famous talk show host tweeted about the video, writing, "There's no excuse for treating anyone like this. I hope Raymond gets justice." That tweet alone got over 500,000 likes. More people began to speak out. Former employees of Charles started sharing anonymous posts about how he used to yell at interns, embarrass managers in front of others, and ignore the needs of the lower-level staff. One person wrote, "He once fired someone for taking a day off to attend a funeral." A group of activists started a petition online, "Fire Charles Barrington and give Raymond justice." It gained over 100,000 signatures in just one day. Back at home, Ramon sat on his couch, holding the flip phone in his hand. It kept ringing news stations, bloggers, even a lawyer who wanted to offer his services for free. Raymond didn't answer most of them. He didn't want trouble. He just wanted peace. But deep inside, he also felt something else. For years, he had worked quietly, cleaning after others, never asking for much. But now the world was seeing what he had always known, that dignity doesn't come from money or power. It comes from how you treat others. The next morning, Raymond found a note on his locker at work. It said, "Thank you for always doing your job with a smile. You deserve better." The note wasn't signed, but it made him pause. Inside the executive boardroom, things were heating up. Board of directors, many of whom had stayed quiet for years, now had no choice. They were watching the company's stock fall. Sponsors were pulling out. Partner companies were asking for statements. The head of the board, an older woman named Margaret Fields, spoke firmly. "Charles, your behavior has brought us into the worst PR crisis in company history. We cannot continue this way." Charles sat in silence. "You will be suspended while we review everything," Margaret continued. "And depending on what we find, further actions will be taken." Charles slammed his pen down. "Over a janitor?" "No," she replied. "Over your behavior. And that janitor? He's more respected than you are right now." The day ended. Raymond sat on the same bench he used every evening before heading home. The building was quieter than usual. Some people nodded at him kindly. Others gave small smiles. Raymond didn't need to say much. He just picked up his cleaning cart and pushed it slowly toward the elevator. The world had started to change. And it began with a simple act of cruelty caught on camera. But what would come next was something no one could have predicted. The days after Charles Barrington's suspension were filled with silence and tension inside the company. The air in the office had changed. People walked more carefully, spoke in whispers, and looked at Raymond with quiet respect, even nodded or smiled at him, something they had never done before. Raymond, however, stayed the same. He arrived early, mopped the floors, cleaned the windows, and stayed out of the way. But inside, he felt something different. It was not pride or anger. It was a quiet strength. Like something inside him had been unlocked after years of being ignored. Outside the company walls, the world wasn't staying quiet. The video of the incident had now reached millions across the globe. Talk shows were discussing it, newspapers had written editorials about it, and human rights groups were demanding workplace dignity laws. People were no longer just angry, they were looking deeper. A journalist named Maria Jenkins had been following the story closely. She worked for a national newspaper and had covered many stories about workers' rights and social justice. Something about Raymond's story touched her heart. It reminded her of her father, who had worked 2 jobs to support the family and was never truly seen. Maria decided to dig deeper. She began calling former employees of Charles's company, asking about their experiences. At first, most were afraid to talk. Charles had power, and many had signed contracts that stopped them from speaking. But slowly, a few voices came forward. One former executive assistant shared, "He once screamed at me in front of 20 people just because the projector wasn't working. I cried in the bathroom for hours." a junior manager said. He made jokes about the cleaning staff, said they were lucky to even have jobs. No one ever said anything because they were scared. Another ex-employee revealed something more serious. A few years ago, he forced a woman to quit after she requested maternity leave. He told her the company needed someone more committed. Maria carefully documented everything. She spoke with lawyers, checked old reports, and looked at employee exit records. A clear pattern began to form. Charles Barrington had not just acted rudely. That one time his behavior had been like this for years, but no one had challenged him before. He was too rich, too powerful, and everyone thought they needed him. But now, things were different. Maria published her report online with the headline, "More than one moment, the pattern of power behind the viral video." It was shared over 1 million times in one day. The article revealed years of complaints, hidden settlements, and unfair treatment of employees. The company's image was now in serious trouble. Sponsors canceled their partnerships. One of the company's biggest investors, a major bank, pulled out. Stock prices dropped sharply, and the board was in full panic mode. Inside the company, meetings were being held every hour. The board members had once trusted Charles to lead, but now they felt betrayed. How could they have ignored so many warning signs? How had they allowed this to go on for so long? Meanwhile, Raymond was still trying to keep life simple. He refused to give interviews, no matter how many people called. He didn't want fame. He didn't want revenge. He just wanted to do his job in peace. But that didn't stop the public from caring. A group of workers from around the city organized a small rally outside the building, holding signs that read, "Justice for Raymond, respect all workers." No one is too small to matter. Raymond watched the rally through the glass doors and shook his head slowly. He never asked for any of this, just wanted kindness. Back at the boardroom, the pressure was growing. Margaret Fields, the chairperson of the board, called another emergency meeting. She held the latest report from HR in her hand. It detailed not just the viral incident, but also the past 5 years of internal complaints. "This is no longer about saving the company's image," she said firmly. "This is about doing what's right, and we cannot ignore the truth anymore." Of the members, a quiet man named David spoke up. "I once saw Charles throw a folder at a staff member during a meeting. I never said anything. I was scared. But now I see that silence helped create this mess." Another board member nodded. "We've all been silent." They voted, and the result was clear. Charles Barrington was to be permanently removed as CEO of the company. The announcement was made the next morning. A simple message appeared on the company's website and was sent to all employees, effective immediately. "Charles Barrington is no longer with the company. We are committed to rebuilding a culture of respect, equality, and dignity for all." When Raymond received the news from Lena, he didn't say anything at first. He just sat quietly in the break room, looking down at his worn hands. "Finally," he said softly, "I didn't want anyone to lose their job. I just wanted to be treated like a person." Lena smiled gently, reminded the world that everyone matters. That same day, Raymond got a letter from the new acting CEO. It offered him a lifetime pension, full health coverage, and the option to retire anytime he chose. The company also offered to name the new employee lounge after him. They called it the Raymond Room. Raymond was touched, but said he would think about it. He wasn't used to being the center of attention. Meanwhile, Charles Barrington's name was being removed from office doors, company websites, and emails. His empire had crumbled almost overnight. No one had imagined that one careless act could bring down a man so powerful. But it wasn't just one act. It was a lifetime of ignoring the people around him. A week later, a short clip appeared online. It showed Charles walking alone through an airport, wearing sunglasses and looking down. Reporters tried to speak to him, but he stayed quiet. The man who once ruled over others with power now had no one standing beside him. At the same time, a local school invited Raymond to speak to students about life, work, and kindness. He was nervous, but he agreed. Standing in front of a room full of teenagers, he said, "I've mopped floors for over 20 years. People walk past me without seeing me, but that's okay, 'cause I see them. I see the ones who smile. I see the ones who don't. And what I've learned is this: being Kind doesn't cost anything, but it means everything. The room was silent. Then one student stood up and clapped. Then another. Soon, the entire room was applauding. Raymond looked down, smiled, and whispered, "Thank you." That night, he sat by his small window at home, sipping tea and looking at the city lights. For the first time in a long time, he felt seen not as a janitor, but as a human being, and all around the world. People were remembering a simple truth: how you treat others matters always. Raymond's life had changed in ways he never imagined. Just a few weeks ago, he was quietly mopping floors before sunrise, unnoticed and unbothered. Now, he was being invited to events, getting letters from strangers and receiving awards. People were calling him a symbol of dignity, a quiet hero who reminded the world about kindness and respect. But Raymond didn't let it change who he was. He still woke up early, made his tea, and walked to work wearing his same blue uniform. He didn't want a fancy suit or a big house. He didn't want interviews or bright lights. He just wanted to be treated like a human being and for others to feel the same. One morning when he arrived at work, he noticed something new in the lobby. A small table had been placed near the entrance, and on it was a simple plaque. Read, "Dedicated to Raymond for reminding us that everyone deserves respect." There were flowers beside it. And under the glass of the table, there was a printed picture of Raymond quietly working, with soft light shining on him. Someone had captured the photo while he was mopping the lobby weeks ago, before anyone knew his name. He stood in front of it for a while, not because he wanted praise, but because for once, his quiet work had been seen. People started arriving and nodding at him as they passed. Few even said good morning with warm smiles. A young woman approached him, holding a cup of coffee. She was one of the new hires. "Hi, Mr. Raymond," she said softly. "I'm new here, but I saw the video, and I just wanted to say thank you." Raymond smiled kindly and replied, "Thank you, dear, and welcome." It's upstairs. The company had begun to change. The board brought in a new CEO, Ms. Helen Crawford, a woman known for her honesty and empathy. She believed in teamwork and kindness, and the first thing she did was set up a listening program. Any employee, from the janitor to the manager, could now share their thoughts directly. She also called Raymond into her office. He was nervous at first, unsure why the new boss wanted to meet him. But when he stepped inside, Helen stood up and shook his hand with respect. "Raymond," she began, "I want you to know that your quiet strength has helped this company grow in a way we never imagined. You didn't ask for attention, but you showed us what true character looks like." Raymond nodded, unsure what to say. Helen continued, "We'd like to offer you a new role, not as a cleaner, but as a consultant. You'll help us train new employees, teach them about respect, kindness, and workplace dignity. And of course, your full pension will still be provided." Raymond blinked, surprised. "Ma'am, I've never taught anything in my life," she smiled. "Sometimes the best teachers are the ones who lead by example. You don't need a lesson plan. You just need your story." Raymond asked for time to think about it. That night, he sat by his small window, sipping tea, just like always. He thought about the offer, thought about his late wife, about the long hours he had spent cleaning floors, about the day the milk was poured over him. He whispered into the quiet room, "Maybe it's time for something new." The next morning, he accepted the role. He didn't stop working entirely. He still cleaned a few times a week by choice. He liked the peace. But now, he also visited training sessions and sat with new staff. He didn't give long speeches. Instead, he just told them his story in simple words. And every time he did, people listened. Some even cried. Others stood up and clapped. Many said they'd never forget his words. Meanwhile, Charles Barrington was struggling. His public image was ruined. He tried to explain himself in a few interviews, but they didn't go well. People saw through his cold words. He tried to launch a new company under a different name, but nobody wanted to work with him. One day, camera caught him entering a restaurant, and the staff quietly refused to serve him. A guest at the table next to him whispered, "That's the man who humiliated the cleaner." Charles left without saying a word. Raymond never smiled at Charles's fall. He wasn't the kind of man to enjoy another person's pain. But he knew this much actions have consequences. Even the rich must learn that lesson. 1 week later, something special happened. A large company from another city held an event called Voices That Changed Us. They invited Raymond to speak. He had never spoken to such a big crowd before. He wore a plain gray suit borrowed from his neighbor and stood in front of hundreds of people. He cleared his throat and said, "I never wanted attention. I only wanted to do my job and go home with peace. But one day, something unfair happened, and the world saw it. And for the first time, people asked, why is this okay? And I think that question matters." He looked around the room, quiet and full. "I believe that no job is too small. No person is less important. Sometimes a small act of kindness means more than anything." The room burst into applause. A woman in the front row stood and clapped with tears in her eyes. That evening, Raymond received dozens of letters and messages. Some came from cleaners, some came from CEOs. One man wrote, "Because of you, I started saying thank you to my janitor every day." Raymond folded the letters and kept them in a small wooden box. It was the same box his wife had once used to keep birthday cards. Then something unexpected happened. A film company approached him. They wanted to make a documentary about his life. Raymond was unsure. But after meeting the director, a kind woman named Zoe, who had grown up in a working-class family, he agreed. But he gave one condition. "No drama," he said. "Just tell it how it happened." The documentary was called The Man with the Mop. It told Raymond's story in his own words, with quiet music, real images from his life, and honest moments. It didn't need loud scenes or fake tears. It showed a man who worked quietly, who was treated unfairly, and who responded not with anger, but with grace. The film won several awards and was played in schools and offices as part of respect training. People started calling Raymond a national treasure, but he always shook his head. "I'm just a man," he said, "nothing more." In the building where he had once been invisible, Raymond was now known by name by everyone from interns to executives. People often stopped to ask how he was doing or just to chat for a moment. He became a gentle voice in the hallways, a reminder that greatness doesn't come from money or titles, it comes from how you treat others. And slowly, the company changed. Not just its image, but its heart. A new culture grew, one of listening, care, and honesty. All because one man didn't fight back with hate. He just kept walking. Head high, heart open. And that quiet walk changed everything. A few months had passed, but the memory of what had happened in the lobby that morning remained fresh in everyone's mind. Yet the story had grown into something more than just a viral video or a trending headline. It had become a lesson one that touched people far beyond the walls of Raymond's workplace. Raymond continued to live simply. He still stayed in his small apartment with the same furniture, the same photos of his late wife on the wall, and the same window view where he liked to sit with his tea. Even though people now knew his name across the country, he never acted like a celebrity. He would say, "Fame doesn't clean the dishes or sweep the floor." But the world around him had changed. The documentary, The Man with the Mop, was now being shown in universities, leadership training programs, and even at big companies that wanted to teach respect in the workplace. In the film, Raymond's gentle voice shared stories about his life, how he started working as a cleaner after losing his job at a factory, how he raised his daughter after his wife's passing, and how he always believed that work done with care was never small. One afternoon, Raymond was invited to a school in a small town nearby. A teacher had shown the film to her class of 12-year-olds, and the students had written him letters afterward. They wanted to meet the man who reminded them that every person matters. Raymond agreed to visit. When he walked into the classroom, the children stood and clapped. A young girl handed him a handmade card that said, "Thank you for being kind even when others weren't." Another boy asked, "Mr. Raymond, how did you stay calm when the bad thing happened?" Raymond smiled and said gently, "Because if I let anger speak for me, no one would have heard the truth." The visit left a mark on the students. The teacher later told Raymond that the children had started being more polite to their school staff, the janitor, lunch lady, even the school bus driver. Back at work, the company looked very different now. New posters lined the walls with words like respect, dignity, and kindness is power. Employees were encouraged to share their ideas no matter their position. And every Friday, a staff member was recognized for acts of kindness. It's not just performance. And at the heart of it all was Raymond. He now had an office, not a fancy one, but a small room near the main hall where he could sit, speak to new workers, and share his thoughts with the company leadership. Sometimes he would be invited to board meetings, where his simple wisdom often helped solve complex problems. One time, during a heated discussion between two managers, Raymond quietly said, "Sometimes listening is better than leading." Single sentence changed the tone of the meeting, even though he had officially retired from full-time cleaning. Raymond still picked up the mop now and then. "It helps me think," he would say with a smile. Some days young staff would walk beside him, helping him clean while asking for advice about work and life. They called it walking with Raymond. One day Raymond received a letter in the mail. It was from Charles Barrington. Raymond paused before opening it. He hadn't heard anything about Charles since the news showed him leaving town quietly. Rumors said he had moved to another country trying to start over. The letter was short. "Mr. Raymond, I watched the documentary. I saw the kindness you showed even after what I did. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted to say I'm sorry, not just for the milk, but for how I treated people for years. You reminded the world what real strength looks like. Sincerely, Charles." Raymond folded the letter and placed it in the same wooden box where he kept the others. He didn't tell many people about it. When asked later, he only said, "Sometimes people fall, but they can still re-sift. They're willing to change." Not long after that, the company held a special event. It was called the Raymond Award Ceremony. It was created to honor employees across the country who showed strength, kindness, and respect in the face of difficulty. Workers from all fields were invited: cleaners, nurses, drivers, factory workers, and teachers. Raymond stood on the stage in a plain gray suit. The crowd gave him a standing ovation. But he didn't look proud or proud. He looked thoughtful. When he spoke, his voice was calm and clear. "I've spent my life pushing a mop, not because I had to, but because I believed in doing things right. When someone poured milk on me, I didn't speak out because I wanted attention. I stayed quiet because I didn't want to lose my peace. But you all gave me a voice, and now I hope we use that voice to lift others." He paused, then added, "Kindness isn't weakness. It's strength in its purest form." After the event, people from many backgrounds came up to thank him. One woman, a janitor from another state, hugged him with tears in her eyes and said, "You gave people like me a face." Raymond continued to live in the same apartment, still shopped at the local market, greeted his neighbors with warm smiles, and fed the stray cats near the park. Fame never touched his heart. It only helped him do more good every now and then. He would visit his wife's photo on the wall and talk to her softly. "Can you believe all this?" He'd chuckle. "I just wanted to clean in peace." One morning, Raymond sat by the window. With a notebook, it started writing his story not for fame, but for his granddaughter, who had asked, "Grandpa, will you write about your life for me to read when I grow up?" He smiled and began with the first line, "I was a cleaner." And this is the story of how being quiet helped change the world. As the sun rose behind the city skyline, Raymond sipped his tea, listened to the birds outside, and watched the light dance across the floor. He was no longer invisible. He had become a voice for many, a guide for those who forgot how to care, and a reminder that no matter how quiet your role in the world may seem, your dignity, your kindness, and your humanity always matter. And that's how a simple man with a mop helped clean more than just floors. He helped clean hearts, minds, and clean the way for a better future. The end.